Welcome, everyone, to another deep dive. Today we're tackling, well, one of history's favorite maritime disasters, maybe. There's just something fascinating about watching really big, really complex plans just unravel.
It's true. There's a certain drama to it, isn't there? Like watching a Jenga tower built on a slightly wobbly table.
Exactly. So today we are diving deep into the story of the Spanish Armada back in 1588. We pulled together insights from quite a few historical narratives and some really detailed research.
Yeah, the goal here is to get beyond the sort of headline story,
Right. Our mission is to really pull out the key facts, maybe some surprising details, and help you understand how this massive invasion plan turned into such a legendary failure at sea. We want to separate the history from, well, the myth.
Because there's a lot of myths surrounding the Armada.
Definitely. We'll unpack what happened, sure, but more importantly, why it happened. We'll look at the personalities involved, the planning, or maybe the lack of planning in some areas, and those twists of fate, the unexpected things that really sealed the deal.
And we'll look at the legacy, too, both what really changed and how the story itself got shaped afterwards.
Okay, let's get into it. This is a really fascinating piece of history.
Absolutely. And what's so interesting, I think, is seeing all the layers. It's much more complicated than just England won, Spain lost. There's nuance there, and understanding that nuance gives you a much clearer picture of the time. It's a great case study in, well, how things can go wrong.
For sure. So let's set the stage. Late 1500s, Spain is, arguably the superpower in Europe.
Oh, definitely. They've got enormous wealth pouring in from the Americas, gold, silver, you name it. They have this huge global reach.
And sitting on the throne is King Philip II. Now, this guy, he was diligent, incredibly so, but also a massive micromanager, wasn't he?
That's the reputation, yeah. The patron saint of paperwork, as some sources call him, apparently spent hours going through documents, making notes in the margins. He wanted his hand in everything.
Which sounds dedicated, I guess, but maybe not ideal for, say, a fast-moving military operation.
Well, that's the double-edged sword, isn't it? In that era, personal oversight by the king was seen as a sign of control, of seriousness. But it also creates bottlenecks. Decisions get delayed, especially for something as complex as the Armada. It really highlights the challenge of command back then.
And Philip had serious beef with Queen Elizabeth I of England, didn't he? It wasn't just politics.
No, it was personal, too. First, the religion, obviously. Philip was deeply Catholic, saw himself as its defender. Elizabeth was Protestant, seen as a heretic ruling a nation that should be Catholic. He felt it was his duty almost to fix that.
Plus, she'd turned him down. For marriage.
Twice. Yeah, imagine being the most powerful monarch in Europe, probably the world, and this rival queen rejects your proposal. Not once, but twice. You can see how that might sting.
So mix the religious duty with a dose of personal resentment.
And you get the enterprise of England, that was his name for the plan. Invade England, kick Elizabeth off the throne, install a Catholic ruler. High stakes, but maybe a bit petty underneath it all, too.
Calling it an enterprise definitely makes it sound grand, almost holy.
And that framing was important. It wasn't just war. It was a crusade in his eyes, which is powerful motivation, but maybe it also made him underestimate the sheer practical problems involved. Thinking God's on your side can make you a bit complacent about, naval logistics.
Speaking of which, Philip, the mastermind, he wasn't exactly a sea dog himself, was he?
No, not remotely. Sources joke he probably got seasick just crossing a courtyard. But he was the one calling the shots on this massive naval campaign.
But Spain did have the resources. Huge amounts of money, shipyards, timber.
Oh, absolutely. They could build a massive fleet. And they did. Around 130 ships. Some were absolute monsters, these huge galleons, packed with cannons, soldiers, priests, supplies. The work, it was meant to be overwhelming.
The Catholic Avengers assembling, you could say.
But here's a key thing. Many of those big ships weren't purpose-built warships in the way the English ships were. They were often converted merchant vessels, designed to carry lots of stuff or act like floating castles. Great for transporting troops or for close quarters fighting, but not so nimble.
Right, built for brute force, maybe boarding actions.
Exactly. Castles with cannons is a good description. And that style of fighting turned out to be a problem.
Okay, so the strategy. The Armada sails from Spain, goes up the channel.
Meets up with the Duke of Parma's army waiting in the Netherlands.
Then they invade England together. Simple on paper, maybe?
Deceptively simple. Think about the coordination required. Two huge forces, one at sea, one on the land, needing to link up perfectly across hostile waters with no modern communication. No radio, no satellites, just sending messages by boat, hoping they get through, hoping the timing works out.
It sounds like a recipe for disaster, almost.
The margin for error was practically zero. It was an unprecedented logistical challenge for the 16th century. You just didn't really try things on this scale, coordinating separate arms like that.
And then there's the commander Philip chose for the Armada, the Duke of Medina Sidonia.
Ah, yes, Medina Sidonia. Wealthy. Yes, loyal. Absolutely. Catholic. Devoutly. Nearby. Conveniently so.
Experienced naval commander.
No.
Yeah.
Not even slightly. Zero naval experience. And the kicker, he also got terribly seasick.
You couldn't make it up. So the guy leading the biggest fleet ever assembled hated sailing.
It seems loyalty and status trumped actual naval skill in Philip's decision-making process there, a critical flaw looking back.
So May 1588, this incredible fleet set sail, but it's already got problems.
Big problems. Morale wasn't great. A lot of the soldiers were conscripts, didn't really want to be there. Sailors were apparently underpaid. And the supplies, oh dear.
What about them?
They were loaded in Spain, often in warm weather, barrels of food, water casks. They started spoiling really quickly. Some sources say stuff was going bad faster than you could say past the salt port. So they were heading into enemy waters, potentially low on decent food and water.
Not a great start for the invincible Armada. Meanwhile, England's watching this happen. What are they doing?
Well, Elizabeth's England knew it couldn't match Spain ship for ship in terms of size or numbers. Their navy was smaller, scrappier, maybe held together by luck and sheer determination.
Fewer resources, basically.
Definitely fewer resources. But they had advantages. Their ships were generally newer, faster, more agile, purpose-built warships, not converted cargo haulers.
And they had commanders who knew the sea, like Sir Francis Drake.
Exactly. Drake was, well, a legal pirate, a privateer. He'd spent years raiding Spanish ships, knew their tactics, knew how to fight at sea. He and guys like Howard, the Lord High Admiral, understood their own strengths.
Which weren't about slugging it out, right?
No, that would be suicide against the big Spanish galleons. Their plan was different. Use speed, use maneuverability, dart in, fire cannons from a longer range than the Spanish were used to, then get out before the Spanish could close in and board.
Like mosquitoes at a barbecue.
That's a great analogy. Annoy them, damage them, disrupt them, but don't get swatted.
So the Armada enters the English Channel. Must have been terrifying.
Imagine it. This huge crescent formation, miles wide, just slowly moving up the coast. A floating city bristling with guns. Intimidation was definitely part of the plan.
But the English stuck to their guns, so to speak.
They did. They shadowed the Armada, kept their distance. It became this week-long, slow-motion chase up the channel. The English would dart in, fire some shots, hit rigging or hulls, then zip away. The Spanish couldn't really pin them down. It must have been frustrating for the Spanish commanders.
Immensely. Their whole doctrine was about getting close, grappling, boarding, turning it into a land battle on the sea. But the English just refused to play that game. They were dictating the terms of engagement.
And this constant harassment started to wear the Spanish down, psychologically too, perhaps.
I think so. And then came the moment at Calais. The Armada anchors off the French coast, waiting for Parma's army.
The army that wasn't quite ready or able to cross.
Exactly. So the Armada is sitting there, anchored close together.
Yeah.
Vulnerable.
And the English see their opportunity.
They sure do. They take some old, worthless ships, pack them full of anything flammable, tar, gunpowder, pitch, brimstone, set them on fire, and send them drifting towards the anchored Armada in the middle of the night.
Fire ships. A classic, terrifying tactic.
Imagine being on deck, seeing these blazing hulks coming right at you in the dark, on a wooden ship packed with gunpowder itself.
The panic must have been immediate.
Utter chaos. Captains ordered anchor cables cut to escape. The fleet scattered in all directions into the darkness. That tight, protective crescent formation, gone. Just like that.
And this raises that key point, doesn't it? How much of war is psychological? The fire ships didn't actually sink that many Spanish vessels directly, did they?
Very few, if any. But their impact was devastating. They broke the Armada's formation, shattered their cohesion, and crucially destroyed their nerve.
So once they were scattered.
Here's where it gets really interesting. A scattered fleet like that is incredibly vulnerable. The English ships, led by Drake, pounced. They chased down the disorganized Spanish ships, continued peppering them with cannon fire from a distance they couldn't easily reply from.
Taking pot shots, basically.
Pretty much. Damaging masts, sails, hulls, making it harder for them to maneuver or regroup, all while avoiding getting close enough for boarding.
And all this time, where's Parma?
Still stuck. His army is ready in the Netherlands, basically sitting on the beach with their luggage, waiting for a ride that never comes. He aided the Armada to control the sea so his barges could cross, but the Armada couldn't guarantee that control.
And the Dutch rebels were blockading the ports too, weren't they?
Yep. They had their shallow draft vessels, flyboats, controlling the coastal waters Parma needed to use, so he was hemmed in.
And the messages between Medina Sidonia and Parma? Still slow and unreliable.
Hopelessly slow. Philip's insistence on controlling everything from Madrid meant communication was cumbersome. Messages arrived days late, completely out of sync with the rapidly changing situation. A total communication breakdown at the worst possible moment.
It's a textbook example of how a rigid command structure can just fall apart under pressure.
Absolutely. So the Armada, now scattered, unable to meet Parma, is drifting northwards. Then comes the Battle of Gravelines.
The main engagement, really.
Yeah, the English caught them as they were trying to sort of regroup off the Flemish coast. Again, the Spanish ships, big as they were, just couldn't turn quickly enough to aim properly.
While the English, with their faster ships and maybe better trained gun crews,
just kept pounding them. They inflicted serious damage at Gravelines. It became clear to Medina Sidonia, who, let's remember, never wanted the job and doubted the plan.
Right, he'd written to Philip expressing concerns.
He knew then for sure the invasion was off. It just wasn't going to happen.
So what now? They can't go back through the channel. The English are there. The winds are against them.
Only one option left: retreat. But the long way round. North, around the top of Scotland, then down the west coast of Ireland, and try to get back to Spain that way.
A brutal route, especially for ships already damaged and crews already exhausted and low on supply.
And then the weather turned. Violently.
The Protestant wind, as the English gleefully called it later.
Exactly. A series of ferocious storms hit the retreating Armada as it navigated those treacherous northern waters. Ships were blown off course, separated, battered relentlessly.
Many were already leaking, low on food and fresh water.
And these storms just finished them off. Dozens of ships were wrecked on the coasts of Scotland and particularly Ireland, driven onto rocks, foundering in heavy seas.
A terrible end. What happened to the survivors who made it ashore?
It wasn't good. Many drowned trying to land. Those who did make it ashore in Ireland, for instance, were often met with hostility. Some were killed by English garrisons or even by locals. It was desperate.
So putting it all together, flawed plan, poor communication, English tactical skill, the fire ships, the failure to link with Parma, and then the devastating storms.
It was a cascade of failures, really. One problem compounding the next. So what does this all mean? How many actually made it back?
The numbers are grim. Of the roughly 130 ships that set out, maybe only 60 or 70 eventually limped back to Spanish ports over the following weeks and months.
So barely half.
Around that, yeah. And the human cost was immense. Tens of thousands of men lost to battle, disease, starvation, drowning, execution.
And the ships that did return.
They were in horrific shape, leaking, damaged, with crews who were starving, sick with things like typhus and dysentery, utterly traumatized. It was described as a floating funeral procession. Men were reportedly eating ropes, rats, whatever they could find. Just horrific.
Back in Spain, how did Philip react? Did he accept responsibility?
Publicly, not a chance. He framed it as God's will. Famously said, "I sent my ships to fight against men, not against the wind and the waves." It was a way to save face, preserve the image of divine favor.
But privately?
It must have been a massive blow. Years of planning, vast expense, the prestige of the empire on the line, all ending in this utter disaster. A real gut punch, as you said earlier.
And Spain was already fighting other wars, right? This wasn't their only problem.
No, far from it. They were bogged down in the costly revolt in the Netherlands, involved in conflicts in France, constantly needing to protect their treasure fleets coming from the Americas. The Armada failure added another huge strain on resources and morale, but it didn't break Spain overnight.
That's an important point the myths often gloss over.
Definitely. Spain remained a major European power for decades after 1588.
But in England, they spun this differently, didn't they?
Oh, completely. Elizabeth and her government turned it into a massive propaganda victory. They absolutely milked it for every drop.
The Tilbury speech comes to mind. Elizabeth rallying the troops.
Declaring she had the heart and stomach of a king, even though she was a woman. Hugely iconic moment. Whether she actually said those exact words there or not, it became legendary. It cemented her image.
And the whole God blew and they were scattered narrative took hold.
Absolutely. It was presented as divine proof that God favored Protestant England, that Elizabeth was his chosen protector. It was incredibly powerful messaging, both domestically and internationally.
Did Philip learn his lesson? Did he stop trying?
No, actually, which is kind of amazing. Spain launched further smaller armadas against England in the 1590s. None succeeded, often due to storms again.
It's like someone burning dinner and then immediately trying to cook the exact same thing again without changing anything.
A bit like that, yeah. Stubbornness, maybe? Or an inability to accept such a public failure.
So let's talk about the true impact versus this powerful myth. It wasn't the immediate knockout blow to Spain that the story often implies.
No. Spain remained dominant for a good while longer, and England didn't suddenly become mistress of the seas overnight either. That was a much longer, slower process involving many more naval battles and colonial ventures.
So the real significance was more symbolic.
I think that's fair to say. Symbolically, it was huge, especially for England. It became this foundational story, a national bedtime story almost, about resilience, David versus Goliath, divine favor. It massively boosted English national pride and identity.
It created a narrative that lasted for centuries.
Precisely. And this leads to that interesting question. How does a real event get transformed into a myth? And what does the power of that myth tell us about, well, our need for stories, for clear narratives of victory and destiny?
Yeah, the narrative often takes on a life of its own, doesn't it? Smoothing over the messy bits.
Like the sheer human cost. We talk about ships and kings, but underneath it all were tens of thousands of ordinary men.
Those nameless tragedies, sailors, soldiers, drowning, starving, being hunted down after shipwreck. The ones who did make it back often faced poverty and neglect.
Not exactly glorious. More quietly depressing when you focus on the individual lives caught up in it.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, the key takeaways seem clear. The dangers of micromanagement from afar, planning based on hope rather than reality, underestimating your opponent's adaptability.
And never, ever underestimating the power of the sea and the weather, especially when your communication is basically non-existent.
And crucially, how the story itself got written. How history, the event, was reshaped into heritage, the myth, especially for England. It became more powerful in the telling, almost, than the event itself was at the time.
A perfect example of how narrative shapes our understanding of the past.
Which brings us to our final thought for you to ponder. If the Armada story shows how perception and storytelling can reshape even major historical events, what other moments in history, maybe even things happening now, might we be collectively misremembering?
Or perhaps remembering in a very specific way that serves a particular story we like to tell ourselves. Think about the narratives you hear, the national stories, maybe even your own personal stories. What gets emphasized? What gets left out?
It's fascinating how we build these narratives, isn't it? How we select the details to create a version of events that resonates, even if it sands off the rough edges of reality. It's something to definitely think about.